Well, 20 minutes before 7, welcome back and thanks for watching Morning Live. In his Freedom Day speech yesterday, President Cyril Ramaphosa discussed the many inequalities in our country. Now, this as clearly highlighted during the COVID-19 lockdown and as government tries to balance the state of disaster policies with the latest coronavirus information. But let us try to get some analysis now with public policy analyst Pooe about what the president had to say and other issues as well. TK, thanks so much for speaking to us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, Sakina. Thanks for having me.
TK, first off, President Ramaphosa yesterday highlighting the inequalities present in South African society, and we do know that this is probably the most unequal society in the world, and it has, as we've seen, become more prevalent during this lockdown. Now, the lockdown policies, TK, also seem to be working in some areas, not so much in others, but let's take your perspective on all of that.
Well, I think the speech it's a continuation of the fact that, as you've said, we've always had inequality. I don't think COVID has really brought anything to the fore. If anything, it's highlighted how bad it is. And as you rightly put it, where the policy has been working well, and I use the term policy very loosely, it's where I think already existing infrastructure is there. If you look at places like rural areas, that simply has just been, the problem has been exacerbated by the fact that you're basically having to put in piecemeal on-the-go projects, almost like just-in-time initiatives to cover up what has been, neglected areas. If you look at townships, especially the enforcement of issues such as social distancing, it's highlighted the fact that if you don't put the proper infrastructure into place to actually ensure that people can do social distancing, it becomes quite problematic. Where it has also been quite interesting is in areas where you've seen that there's been water shortages, government has quickly come in, with quite nifty thinking around how do we actually we can't now put in bulk infrastructure, what we put into place, which I think has maybe raised the question of if this was been able to be done under these conditions, why has it not been done all this time? So we're actually going to see a lot of government thinking in terms of when government wants to do things, we're seeing that it is possible. And I think that for me, it augurs quite well. But my worry would always be, in times of emergency, people always tend to put their best foot forward. It's almost like when you go on a date, you always put your best foot forward. The key for me will be what happens when we finally start to get grip of the virus and go forward. Are we able to be able to keep the pace at which we're going at? That for me is a bigger question going forward.
And if we just look beyond what he said yesterday, the president, and lockdown policies that we have been given as a nation, what's your view on that, TK? Because some would say it's too much in terms of, not being simple enough. There's so much going on that it's difficult to actually keep a handle on what's supposed to go where.
If you read the president's speech, you actually find that he actually makes mention of the National Development Plan. If you believe if that's a plan, I think we'll just go with what they believe that it is a plan. And he makes quite a critical insight to say, listen, the NDP is supposed to actually come to full tuition in 2030. We've actually got less than 10 years to make it happen. And what the COVID has shown us is that when it comes to issues such as, pandemics, or basically what's termed black swans, we have not quite been ready in terms of policy. If we had to actually just go over the last policies over the last 5 months, how many of us would have actually seen that there's such a thing as Corona coming up? So if anything, it's highlighted the fact that we actually need just more adaptive policies to what's current. By that I mean, this is not going to be, unfortunately, this is not going to be the last of its kind. If you read what's happening in the CDC in America, they tell you that, for the last 5 years, they've been predicting that there are going to be viruses and other economic crashes coming. So what that's saying is our policies adjusted to the realities of our people? As you're saying, are they simple enough to say, listen, do we have proper public transport in times of emergency so that we can actually get people to work without having to worry that, listen, there's not enough social distancing? B, in terms of our healthcare, are we, I think this is where we probably need more discussion, is our healthcare system, because I think it's one thing we've seen that we've got very good healthcare professionals, but we don't have a system that's able to uphold people. And you cannot have these two things running at the same time, where you've got great professionals, but you don't have a system that's working. And in terms of, again, going back to issues of rural life, in South Africa, for some reason, we've actually forgotten that there's people who live in rural areas. And it cannot be that you give them, Jojo tanks in times of emergency. What about these people's issues of education? What about these issues of basically being able to live of what their skills are in terms of employment. So I think we do need a huge policy review, and I doubt that we're going to be able to make the 2030 NDP goals as we wanted to. And I think we should be thankful for one thing for COVID, that it's highlighted what you're saying, that our policies are not simple enough to get to people's issues of stomach, transport, and future.
Now, TK, the president also said that South Africa can no longer afford to defer the 1994 dream, and says in the state of disaster that we're currently in, and we are on level 5, and who knows, we might move to level 4 on Friday, the 1st of May. But do you think these lockdown policies as well have been adequate? Do you think they have been simple enough in terms of, assisting South Africans and assisting to further, curb the spread of the coronavirus?
I'll probably take it in two ways. One, we have to give, I think, government some level of leeway to say, listen, this is almost a first of its kind. If you have to observe what's happening in terms of places like Italy and the United States, and you compare us to, and I'm always wary to compare us to developed countries, but it's an issue of saying, for once, we can actually say, wow, we've had a president who really has shone through, who's actually shown that, listen, he can put the right people into place to get the type of right results. Now, the bigger question to ask is, have we put in the right policies to say that we're going to actually curb this going forward? I think the data and the science is going to bail us out on this, because at the moment, anything we make, any predictions or any analysis we make, we have to do in light of the information coming out from government. And what we can say at the moment is, I think even the world recognizes that, listen, yes, South Africa's lockdown, let's say, regime has been probably harsher than most in the world. But if you look at the fact that I think we're standing on between 90 or so deaths, compare that to when we're hearing people, the 20 and the 30,000 that's happening overseas, we have to say, wow, maybe we can say we're doing well. But I always say, listen, a life lost to a family, you can never quite say everything is well. So I think we probably just have to wait for the data in the long run to be able for us to make a proper assessment. What we can just say for now is they have taken the steps they feel that are necessary. And if we are only standing at 90, I think we kind of have to give government credit for what they've done. It might be uncomfortable, and I think that's the issue that maybe many South Africans are talking about, is the debate of, look, I need to go get work. If I'm not working, I'm not able to put food on the table. And I think that's a debate that speaks to institutional and historical but I think weaknesses which we have not addressed as a country. So I think we almost have to make this it's almost like dichotomy between there is COVID and what COVID has highlighted, and then there is the historical injustices which our state has been very slow to adjust to. And all COVID has basically done is highlight those inequalities. And I think the president also said the same thing.
But because we haven't addressed those institutional weaknesses, doesn't this place us and government in a bit of a catch-22, TK? And I ask this because on the flip side of what you've mentioned in terms of containing the spread of this virus, some feel that perhaps this lockdown and the severity of it is actually punishing the poorest of the poor.
I would agree with that, but then I'd also have to say, what is the alternative? Because again, what I've also enjoyed about this period is that usually, South Africans were very quick to, not complain, but I think always raised what's called the second argument. But what this COVID has actually shown us is that you need to come with data. Because if you're saying to me, okay, listen, TK, yes, we have locked people into poverty, my argument would be saying, no. Before COVID happened, we were failing at that. So the right argument would be to start by saying, how is it that we've not been able to move a lot of our people out of poverty? And by that I mean, for me, and it's just my personal view, I think the only way you move people out of poverty is to give them the means to either be employed or create their own institutions for employment. And I think we've always known for the last 20 years we've been weak at that. So that's an argument which we need to park squarely at the face of government, and also issues of business, to say, why is it that after 20, 25 or 26 years we've been so slow to really get people into formal employment? But then when COVID comes in, we can't simply just say, well, listen, we should really have just gone as business as usual. Because if that's not the argument people are making, then I want to point people to what's happening in America, where people have said, okay, let's go as business as usual. What has happened there? We've seen close to almost, if you can just imagine, I always tell people, use a football analogy, 20 to 30,000 people, that's almost half a stadium of people dying. Now connect that to people's lives and families. So if someone is making an argument that, listen, this thing has been bad, we should have just let the economy continue as normal, then I'm going to say, you're going to have to answer the question, how do you deal with 20 to 30,000 people dying?
So the CSIR, they conducted some research and they found that of the people that they actually surveyed, only half of the people were actually concerned about contracting COVID-19. What does that say? What does that mean? And what does it say about the messaging of the dangers inherent in contracting COVID-19?
I think it's that's what you started with. Is this is over time COVID becomes an economic choice. It's do I go, and if I'm not working, because I think it would be a lot of times we also have to make the distinct, because I always say with these surveys it always would be interesting to get the segmentation of who did you interview, what level of income, because if you speak to professionals, look, you didn't actually have a choice. Your company basically said, listen, you need to work remotely from home. But if you speak with someone who's working in the informal sector, it is literally, because if you look at how they work, you're basically working with live produce. It's a day-to-day existence. So for those people, it's not as easy as saying, listen, I can afford to go shut down my stall in town next to a taxi rank. It's an issue of saying, if I'm not working there, what am I going to do? And then again, for me, I always have to say, we have to put this within the perspective of history and policy, which is to say, that's an historical and institutional thing which we should have been addressing over the last 25 years. So when people do that, I'm not one of those to say, look, let's just quickly blame them and say, these are bad citizens. There's an issue of saying, you should ask, why are you doing that? Because I think people, they might not get the sciences behind this is what COVID is, but if you tell people enough, because especially look at where you come from. South Africa, we've had to live with this thing called HIV and AIDS for the longest time. So people are very well aware when you say a virus and death. People have had enough people in their families and the circles of friendship to understand that there's such a thing as a threat. Maybe the issue has been, look, you're saying this is a threat, you're saying I must stay home, but you're not giving me an alternative to how I must feed my family. And I think that's the bigger thing when people are saying, I can understand why certain people will say, listen, yeah, I see this COVID thing, but I need to live. And it's very hard to stop people from making a living when they say the alternative is for me not to feed my family.
Because people are literally saying things like, I won't die from COVID. Hunger will kill me first. And it speaks to those weaknesses once again, because even when food parcels are available, those seemingly are also used now as political footballs. People, we're told, are storing these so that they can use them at a later stage, because remember, we're supposed to go into an election next year. We've seen where councillors have actually accused mayors of hogging these food parcels when this is meant to go and alleviate the plight of the poorest of the poor, TK?
But why should we be surprised? We've always, South Africa, and I think as a Professor Soma Dr. Figen always puts it, South Africa is a politics of the stomach and the foot. So we should never be surprised that during this time, this is how it's going. I, for one, have never been a fan of food parcels, because what you're simply doing is saying that you live off me and my goodwill, and you should never do that to a human being. I'm just not a fan of that. It should be an issue that if you're if you're in a position of privilege, because I think maybe this is also something that needs to come up, that if you're a mayor, if you're a councillor, you're not employed because you're the best of the best. Let's be very honest. You're employed simply because you had enough votes and you come from a certain political party that's allowed you to do this. It has nothing to do with your skills. And if you are doing that to people, I think it makes you basically just a terrible human being. And then it is maybe the onus on us as citizens to start actually saying, listen, during this time of COVID, who's actually done well? And you kind of see it with our president. It's somebody who has really put the nation first. You might not agree with his position, but then the question we should ask of not just the African National Congress, but any political party is, when you put candidates up for election, any type of election, what type of people are you going to give us? If you're going to give us these old people who come with the thing of saying, I'm going to give you food parcels, those people we need to do away with very quickly. What we need is people who can actually say, listen, I'm running a municipality well, and because I'm running a municipality well, I know what the levels of poverty are in my area. And I've actually, over the last few years, while I've been in office, coming up with initiatives to actually empower people to help themselves. And I think that's the bigger debate going into the local government election. Because another thing is, I know the government has put out 20 billion for local government. Now, but here's my problem with it, is to say, look, after a while, we actually need to start judging how is local government working. Have you been able to do your right job? And because you've not been able to do it, hence poverty has been able to be on the increase.
But do we really expect the same people who evidently, given how the state of municipalities is reported at this point, are incapable of properly running those municipalities, to now suddenly develop those capabilities overnight and do the right thing and make sure that these finances are properly controlled, TK?
Look, I for one, and I don't mean to be a pessimist at this so early in the morning. I for one am never surprised when they do badly. The bigger question, and it's always this, and I think your program has always hinted at that with South Africa, is just to say, are we taking enough of our care to actually know what's happening within our institutions of government? Local government is it's a cold face where everybody meets, and I think as South Africans, perhaps look, and if I'm wrong, I do apologize to South Africans. We've not done a good enough job of embedding ourselves within the structures of governance to actually be able to hold these people to account. And by account, and I mean beyond just going beyond the vote, I'm talking about, are we in ward committees where we actually are holding people to account to say, listen, I might not understand the intricacies of how the PMFMA or the MFMA work, but I know good enough to know that you're not doing your job here. And are we airing them out over and above just going to protest? Because I think, look, 2 decades of protests, we've seen that, listen, this thing is not working. So maybe we need to come up as citizens, not so much as government, as citizens. We need to come up with ways for us to embed ourselves within local government structures and actually hold these people to account. Because they are not going to do it. And if we are still waiting on them to do it, then I'm sorry, we're just basically going to get the same results for the next 2 decades.
And just the final one, TK, with regard to the monies that the government has already put out. We talk about the Solidarity Fund. The president announces another 500 billion rand. All of these monies, if you look at where it is going, we still hear small businesses complaining. We still hear people saying that they are incapable of accessing the avenues through which they are meant to get these funds. So where does that leave us?
It leaves us, I think, where we started, which is to say, people. Well, I think we should really celebrate people who are able to actually put money into these funds. It shows that, look, maybe at the core, South Africans are really, look, we really want the best for other citizens. But the COVID does not make people and structures, and this is a sad thing, COVID doesn't make institutions and structures and policies work overnight. If you've been poor at delivering such services to small businesses, to people at the ground, COVID doesn't mean that things change overnight. And it's an issue of saying, because we've not really worked on our let's say, our supply chains of getting policy impacts to people, this is what we're left with. So COVID, yes, it's good that people are given this money, but unfortunately, institutions of government, it's almost like cement. If you've started on a bad foot, they tend to be, they're set in for a very long time. So what this should be showing us is to say, now that government is able, because we've been able to see government quickly change course when things are not working, then we need to simply say, hold government to the fire and say, listen, when you want to, you can work very quickly. So make sure that now you can actually work towards ensuring that small business owners can actually benefit from the money that's coming out post-COVID as such.
Thank you so much for your time this morning, public policy analyst TK Pooe, for talking to us about government actions and policies during the current COVID-19 disaster in one of the world's most unequal societies. Let's take a break and then we'll bring you your 7 o'clock news.